Hello everyone, and welcome back to Complete and Total Random. Today we're going to be going off of viewer suggestions. All the suggestions on the previous video, I compiled them into a list and we'll be going through them today. And I would just like to thank you all for all the suggestions. It was really awesome. And with that, let's get into the video. So the first vehicle I would like to go over is the DAF Pantserwagen M39. This is a 6-wheeled armored car design built by the Netherlands in 1939. They were designed to modernize and rearm the Dutch royal forces. 2 of these would see combat during the Battle of Holland. The M39 supported a 95 horsepower Ford Mercury V8 engine, allowing this vehicle to reach the speeds of 75 kilometers an hour. It was armed with the 37mm Bofors gun in the turret and a coaxial mounted Lewis gun, as well as 2 more Lewis machine guns mounted in the hull. You can kind of see them sticking out of the front and rear. Though this vehicle only had 10mm of armor, making it very weak to anti-tank weaponry, I do think it would be quite a fun vehicle to see in game, especially because it's just so fast. I think it'd make a wonderful light tank. Some of these vehicles were captured by and used by the Germans. There was only 12 of them ever produced, 2 of which saw combat, and then the rest were captured and used by the Germans for the rest of the war. Next up, we have the Belgium T13 tank destroyer. These were a series of 3 different tank destroyers built by the Belgians on the Cardin-Lloyd chassis and used as part of the Belgian mobilization of their armed forces before the outbreak of World War II. Sporting a potent FRC 47mm Mod 1939 gun and a FN Browning 7.62 automatic rifle. This vehicle had quite a lot of firepower, though it only had 6 to 13mm of armor, though this also put the vehicle at a very small weight of 4.5 metric tons. The first 2 models, the B1 and B2, both sported rear-mounting guns with limited traverse, unless you folded down the driver's armored protection. Then the turrets would be able to fully traverse, though this would also reduce crew protection by a considerable amount. Then the third and final model, the B3, allowed for a fully traversed turret without the need to expose the driver. Though these turrets still had a hole in the back, meaning the tank wasn't completely protected from small arms fire. These tiny tank destroyers proved quite effective against German armor at the time, while the German army pushed into the Ardennes. Their size making them perfect to ambush columns of German tanks, though due to their lack of armor, they would have to essentially fire on the enemy tanks, take a couple of them out, and then retreat. Otherwise, if return fire was enacted upon them, they would usually be taken out due to their, as I said, considerable lack of armor. Next up, we have the Vickers T15. This was a British produced tank operated by the Belgian military from 1935 onwards. The Belgians were interested in this design as it was based on the Cardin-Lloyd, as the same tank that we just chassis that we just talked about for the T13. They also had other designs that they were currently using at this time. This was before they had produced the T13. This was a 3.8-ton light tank propelled by a 6-cylinder 88 horsepower engine that could reach speeds up to 64 kilometers an hour. Though it does have some downsides if added to the game, having only 7 to 9mm of armor, and its firepower only being a 13.2mm Hotchkiss machine gun. This would only be able to put out about 28mm of pen at point blank, and a 7.62 Browning model 1930. This light tank, when it was produced, was unable to deal with basically anything other than other soft-skinned vehicles and a handful of armored cars, but I do think it would still be an interesting addition to the game, kind of like the M2A2 we already have. Next, we have the Object 150, a Soviet project to up-armor the KV-1 to 90 millimeters of armor. This tank used the same 76mm F32 cannon as the KV-1E. That's the up-armored KV we have in-game with the added plates on the outside. The front, sides, and rear of both the turret and hull were completely up-armored from the KV-1's 75mm of armor to 90mm of armor all around. They also added a commander's cupola on the roof. You can see it in the picture here, which allowed for the commander to have better visibility. This was also armored at 90mm. The tank also received a new 700 horsepower engine to accommodate for its new weight. This tank was pressed into service during the invasion of Russia during World War II by the Germans, and very little is known of what became of it. By the reports I could find, it seems like it was actually quite effective at taking out German armor and all that at the time due to its tremendous armor. But other than that, I have no idea what happened to it. Next up, we have another KV-1 tank. This is the KV-1 with the ATO-41 flamethrower in its hull. Sometimes this is called the KV-6, though it never actually received this name officially, and it is a misnomer. This modification was done to the KV-1 by replacing his bow machine gun with a flamethrower, the ATO-41. Only 4 of these were ever assembled. Out of 10 chassis produced, only 4 of them were ever assembled. And then the other 6 basically had their flamethrower ports that were built in, just kind of blocked off by a steel plate, and then just turned into back into normal KV-1s. The flamethrower had many issues, such as misfiring. Because of this, the small quantity that were made, their limited production, and their limited use, only a handful of images of these tanks exist, and from what I can find, there is no Soviet taken pictures. There's only pictures of the tanks after they were captured by the Germans. But I do think this would make a quite interesting, maybe event vehicle or a folded KV-1. Now for a disclaimer. For the last 2 vehicles in this list, I must admit I had a lot of trouble finding any concrete information about them, other than a handful of pictures and some anecdotal evidence. So please take these 2 last vehicles with a grain of salt. They were both believed to be just gun emplacements, and so that's probably why there's very little information about them. If you guys have found any good information or good sources on them, let me know in the comments below. But these might still make interesting vehicles, so I thought I'd go over them nonetheless. Now that disclaimer is out of the way, let's take a look at the Panzer IV ZIS-3. From what I could gather, this was used as a static border defense by the Bulgarian army using a modified Panzer IV turret, which was raised, as you can kind of see in the picture. It's like almost as if they just cut off the roof and welded some flat panels onto it so that the ZIS-3 cannon could fit. And it looks like it's still on a normal Panzer IV hull. I'm not quite sure which variant of the Panzer IV hull, but a Panzer IV hull nonetheless. Due to the lack of information, that's why I couldn't find anything about any modifications done to the vehicle other than what is obviously on the exterior. I would assume that any ammo racks and stuff were probably modified to fit the ZIS-3's ammo, though I cannot confirm this. It's also unknown if this vehicle was ever drivable at all in its current configuration, or if this was some knocked out hull that they kind of just put a turret on and then buried. And last, but definitely not least, we have another tank with very little information on it. the T-34-62, as it is colloquially known. This appears to be a modified T-34 hull. Not sure which variant of the T-34 chassis, but it appears to be modified to fit a T-62 turret. From the information I could gather, this was a modification done by Bulgaria in 1980 to be used as a static bunker, just like the Panzer IV Zis-6, and of course just like the Panzer IV Zis-6. I could not find any other informations about any modifications done or if it was ever drivable. Though of course, just like the Panzer IV Zis-6 again, I would assume that at least its ammo racks were modified to hold shells. I don't know if there's any other modifications done. I don't know if they took any parts out, added anything new. But with that, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching the video. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have any other suggestions for vehicles you'd like me to go over. I found researching all these really fun, and I hope you found this video enjoyable too. And I'd like to thank you all for watching.